They lied about me to protect themselves. Before I share this story, I want to know you're here with me. Just comment, listening below, or let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever been blamed for something you didn't do by the people who were supposed to protect you, this story is for you. Sometimes the people you trust most will sacrifice you to save themselves. What matters is what you do when you discover the truth. Thank you for being here. Now let me tell you what happened. The call came at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. My father Victor's voice was cold and formal on the phone. "Lucas, come to the house immediately. We need to discuss something urgent. Can it wait until morning?" "No, come now." I drove from my London flat to the family estate outside the city, my stomach tight with anxiety. Victor didn't make late-night demands unless something was seriously wrong. When I arrived, the house was dark except for the light spilling from Victor's study. I walked through the familiar hallway and pushed open the heavy oak door. Victor sat behind his massive desk. My brother Grant stood near the window, arms crossed. My mother Beatrice sat in the corner chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. All three of them stared at me as I entered. The atmosphere felt wrong, staged, like they had been waiting for me. "Sit down," Victor said, gesturing to the chair facing his desk. I sat slowly, looking between the three of them. "What's going on?" Victor slid a folder across the desk toward me. Inside were printed bank statements, transaction records, and account histories. My name appeared on every page. "We've discovered something disturbing," Victor said. His voice was measured, controlled. "Company funds have been systematically drained over the past 6 months. £87,000 transferred in small increments to cover what appears to be personal debt." I stared at the documents, my heart pounding. "I don't understand." "The transfers came from accounts you have access to. The timing matches periods when you were handling quarterly reconciliations." Victor's eyes were hard. "You've been stealing from the family company to cover gambling debts." "That's insane. I don't gamble. I didn't make these transfers." Grant spoke from the window. "The evidence is right there, Lucas. Your access credentials. Your authorization codes." I looked at the bank statements more carefully. The numbers were real. The transactions existed. But I had never authorized any of them. "This is fabricated," I said, my voice shaking. "Someone manipulated these records." Victor leaned forward. "Confess now, or I make this public." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I'm not confessing to something I didn't do." Victor's expression didn't change. He pulled another document from his desk drawer. "Then we have a problem. I've already drafted a statement explaining the situation. The family will handle this internally to avoid scandal. But you must accept responsibility. I'm not accepting blame for fraud I didn't commit." "You will," Victor said coldly, "or everyone in the industry will know that Victor Manning's youngest son is a thief and a gambling addict. Your career will be over before you're 30. I looked at my mother. She was staring at her hands, refusing to meet my eyes. Grant stood motionless by the window. They had already decided. This wasn't a confrontation to discover truth. It was an execution where they had already agreed I was guilty. "Why are you doing this?" I asked quietly. "Because the alternative is worse," Victor replied. "Sign the statement. Admit you made mistakes. Accept a suspension from the company." We moved forward quietly. My hands were shaking. I looked at the papers in front of me. The statement was already typed, waiting for my signature. If I signed, I admitted to crimes I didn't commit. If I refused, Victor would destroy my reputation publicly. "I need to think about this," I said. Victor stood and walked to the study door. He turned the lock with a sharp click. "You're not leaving until you sign." My mother finally looked up, her eyes wet. But she said nothing. I realized in that moment that they had sacrificed me. Whatever was really happening, they had chosen me as the scapegoat. And I was trapped in a locked room with my executioners. I signed the document. Not because I was guilty, but because I needed time to understand what was happening. My hand trembled as I wrote my name at the bottom of the page. Victor took the paper immediately, sliding it into his desk drawer like evidence in a trial. "You'll take a 6-month leave from the company," he said, "officially for personal development. We'll tell the board you're addressing personal issues. If you stay quiet and cooperate, this remains internal. And if I don't, Then I released this statement to every business contact we have. You'll be finished. I left the house at 2 in the morning, my mind racing. I drove back to London in silence, trying to piece together what had just happened. Something about the bank statements bothered me. A small detail I couldn't quite identify. When I got home, I pulled out my laptop and searched through my archived emails. I found the travel confirmation for a conference I had attended in March. The dates were March 15th through 18th. I opened the photo of the bank statements I had taken with my phone before leaving Victor's study. The largest transfer, £12,000, was dated March 16th at 2:47 p.m. But I had been in Berlin that entire day. I had boarding passes, hotel receipts, and conference attendance records proving I was out of the country when that transfer allegedly occurred. I checked 3 more transactions. March 22nd, April 8th, April 30th. Each one corresponded to a day when I was provably elsewhere. Conference in Frankfurt. Client meeting in Edinburgh. Training seminar in Manchester. Someone had used my credentials to make transfers while I was hundreds of miles away. And I knew exactly who had access to replicate my authorization codes. My brother Grant. I spent the next week quietly investigating. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't tell Victor the First had found the timestamp inconsistency. I just gathered evidence. I contacted the company's IT department using an old friendship with a systems administrator named Paolo. We had worked together before I transitioned to the finance side. Paolo, I need a favor. Can you pull access logs for my account credentials over the past 6 months? That's unusual. Is there a problem? Just a routine security check. I want to make sure no one's been using my access inappropriately. He sent me the logs within 2 days. The data was clear. My credentials had been accessed from the London office on dates when I was traveling. The IP addresses matched workstations in the executive wing, specifically Grant's office. I cross-referenced the access times with the suspicious transactions. Every single fraudulent transfer occurred within minutes of my credentials being accessed from Grant's terminal. My brother had stolen company money using my identity. Then he and Victor had framed me to cover it up. But why? I dug deeper into the company's financial records. Public filings showed steady growth, healthy margins, and strong performance. But something felt off about the expansion project Victor had announced 6 months ago. A new European division. Aggressive market entry. Projected £15 million investment with expected £40 million return within 3 years. I found the internal projections buried in archived strategy documents. The numbers looked impressive on paper, but when I compared them to actual market data, the assumptions were wildly optimistic. Victor had bet the company's reserves on a doomed expansion that was already failing. The missing £87,000 was just the beginning. The real losses were being hidden somewhere much deeper. I could have gone to the police immediately. I had evidence of fraud, identity theft, and corporate manipulation. I could have exposed Grant and Victor within days. But something stopped me. If Grant had stolen £87,000 using my credentials, and Victor was protecting him, this felt bigger than one theft. This felt like a pattern. I decided to stay silent and document everything. If they wanted to build a narrative that I was unstable and reckless, I would build a timeline of truth so detailed it couldn't be questioned. I created encrypted backups of every document, every email, every access log. I organized them chronologically with notes on what each piece proved. I reached out to former Manning Capital employees who had left under unclear circumstances. I started with a woman named Charlotte who had resigned abruptly 2 years earlier. Charlotte, this is Lucas Ellis. We worked together briefly before you left. I'm hoping to ask you some questions about your departure. There was a long pause on the phone. Why now? Because I think what happened to me might have happened to you. Another pause. Are you in a safe place to talk? Yes. Victor blamed me for a client relationship that collapsed. He told the board I had mishandled communications. I was given a choice: resign quietly or be fired publicly with cause. Did you mishandle the relationship? No. The client left because Victor had promised returns he couldn't deliver. When they questioned the projections, he needed someone to blame. I was convenient. My hands tightened on the phone. Did you have proof? I kept emails, but I was 26 and terrified. I signed an NDA and left. Would you be willing to share those emails now? Why? What are you planning? I'm planning to make sure he can't do this to anyone else. Charlotte agreed to send me everything she had kept. Over the next 2 weeks, I uncovered a pattern that turned my stomach. Charlotte's case wasn't isolated. Victor had been burying failures for years by sacrificing junior employees. 4 years ago, an analyst named Trevor had been blamed for a regulatory filing error that actually originated from Victor's rushed approval process. Trevor was fired. Victor's reputation remained clean. 3 years ago, a project manager named Simone was blamed for a contract dispute that collapsed because Victor had agreed to impossible terms. Simone resigned under pressure. 18 months ago, an associate named Brian was accused of leaking market-sensitive information when a deal fell through. Brian left the industry entirely. Each time, Victor had identified someone expendable and constructed a narrative that protected the company's leadership while destroying an individual's career. I was just the latest victim, but this time, he had chosen his own son. I contacted Trevor, Simone, and Brian through LinkedIn. Each one confirmed the same pattern: executive mistake, junior blame, forced exit, and NDAs that kept them silent. I kept documentation, Trevor said when we spoke. I was too scared to use it then. But if you're building a case, I'll help. Simone sent me internal memos showing Victor had explicitly directed blame toward her in board communications. Brian provided emails proving the leak had come from Victor's office, not his. I now had evidence of systematic scapegoating spanning 4 years. Multiple victims. Documented lies. A pattern that proved this wasn't about protecting the company from my individual failure. It was about protecting Victor from accountability for his own. I reached out to a former executive named Christopher who had left Manning Capital 5 years earlier. He had been Victor's partner before a falling out that was never fully explained publicly. We met at a quiet pub in South London. Christopher was in his 60s, retired now, but still sharp-eyed and cautious. "Why are you digging into this?" he asked after I explained what had happened. "Because I need to understand how deep this goes." Christopher studied me carefully. "Your father is a brilliant businessman and a terrifying manipulator. He built Manning Capital on 2 principles: appear infallible to outsiders and sacrifice anyone who threatens that appearance." How long has he been doing this? Since the beginning. I was his first real scapegoat. Christopher explained that he and Victor had made a catastrophic investment in the company's early years. When it failed, Victor rewrote the history to make it look like Christopher had acted alone against advice. He forced me out and kept the company. I could have fought it legally, but he had already poisoned the well with our investors. Fighting would have destroyed what remained of my reputation. Do you have documentation? I kept everything. Partnership agreements, investment memos, board minutes. I kept them as insurance in case Victor ever came after me again. Christopher handed me a USB drive. "Everything's on here. If you're going to expose him, make sure you finish it." Victor doesn't forgive threats. I took the drive home and spent the entire night reviewing the files. Partnership agreements showing joint decisions that Victor later claimed were solely Christopher's responsibility. Investment analysis showing Victor had pushed for the doomed project despite warnings. The pattern went back further than I had imagined. 15 years of systematically shifting blame to protect his image. And now he was doing it to his own son. My phone buzzed late one evening. Grant's name appeared on the screen. "We need to talk. Can I come to your flat?" I hesitated. "Why? Please, just let me come over." He arrived 20 minutes later, looking exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes. His usual confident posture was gone. We sat in my small living room. Grant wouldn't look at me directly. "I know you didn't steal that money," he said finally. "Then why did you let Father accuse me?" "Because I panicked." His voice cracked slightly. "I made a terrible mistake, and Father said we had to control it before investors found out." "What mistake?" Grant explained the European expansion. He had been leading the project. He had assured Victor the market research was solid, the projections achievable, the risks manageable. But he had missed critical factors. Regulatory complications, market saturation, currency exposure. The expansion was hemorrhaging money. 2.3 million pound lost in 6 months with no path to profitability. Father was furious, Grant continued. He said the board would lose confidence in me, that investors would question the entire company. He needed someone to blame for the cash flow problems before anyone audited the expansion. So you used my credentials to steal smaller amounts and make it look like I was covering personal debt. Father suggested it. I executed it. I thought. Grant's voice broke completely. I thought you would just sign the statement and it would be over. I didn't realize he would lock you in that study and force you. You framed your own brother. I know. Tears were running down his face now. I know, and I can't live with it. But Father says if I confess, the whole company collapses. Everyone loses their jobs. Our family is destroyed. He says I have to stay quiet. And you're here because you want my permission to keep lying? I'm here because I need you to understand I'm trapped too. I looked at my brother, crying in my living room, and felt nothing but cold clarity. He wasn't a mastermind. He was another victim of Victor's system, but he had still chosen to sacrifice me. You need to leave, I said quietly. Lucas, please. For the family. Can't we just get out? After Grant left, I sat in the dark for hours. I could expose everything now. I had the proof. I had Grant's confession recorded on my phone. But I realized something. Grant was right about one thing. If I destroyed Victor now, 200 employees would lose their jobs through no fault of their own. I needed a different strategy. One that protected innocent people while still ensuring accountability. The counterattack came faster than I expected. 2 days after Grant's visit, I received a formal letter from Manning Capital's legal department. Effective immediately, my access to all company systems and communications was terminated. My shares in the family trust were frozen pending resolution of internal matters. All contact with company employees was prohibited. Victor was isolating me, cutting off resources, making me financially vulnerable while reinforcing the narrative that I was unstable. My professional contacts started treating me differently. A former colleague canceled a coffee meeting at the last minute. A recruiter I had worked with stopped returning calls. Someone was quietly spreading word that I was having personal problems. Substance issues, maybe. Financial irresponsibility. The whispers were vague enough to avoid defamation, but damaging enough to make people cautious. Victor wasn't just protecting himself. He was systematically erasing my professional credibility. Then I received an unexpected email. The sender was Marcus Webb, CEO of Riverside Capital, a competing investment firm. Mr. Ellis, I'd like to discuss a confidential opportunity. I'm aware of recent developments at Manning Capital and believe you may be interested in a fresh start. Would you be available to meet? I stared at the email for a long time. This could be a trap, or it could be exactly what I needed. I researched Riverside Capital thoroughly. They were smaller than Manning Capital, but well-respected. Marcus Webb had a reputation for integrity and aggressive market positioning. I agreed to the meeting. Marcus Webb's office overlooked the Thames. He was in his early 50s, direct and sharp-eyed. I'll be frank with you, Lucas, he said after we sat down. I know what's happening at Manning Capital. Or at least, I know enough to understand you're being set up. How do you know that? Because this isn't the first time Victor Manning has sacrificed someone to protect his image. We tried to hire one of his former employees 3 years ago. When we did our due diligence, we discovered the accusation against her was fabricated. Charlotte, Marcus nodded. We didn't hire her because she had signed an NDA and couldn't fully explain what happened. But we documented what we found. Victor has a pattern. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm offering you a position. Senior analyst. Competitive salary. Complete independence from your family's influence. And legal protection if Victor tries to retaliate. What's the catch? No catch. But I should mention that we're currently conducting market analysis on European investment opportunities. That analysis will include reviewing Manning Capital's recent expansion project as a case study. I understood immediately. By hiring me, Marcus was gaining insight into Manning Capital's vulnerabilities. And by auditing the failed expansion publicly, he would expose the truth without me having to speak a word. When can I start? I asked. Within a week, I had resigned from my nominal position at Manning Capital and joined Riverside Capital. The move gave me financial independence and professional protection. More importantly, it terrified Victor, because my silence worried him more than my accusations would have. The audit began quietly. Riverside Capital's analysis team requested public financial disclosures from Manning Capital as part of a broader market study. Everything was legal and standard industry practice. But the questions they asked were precise, aimed directly at the European expansion project's financial assumptions, market research methodology, and cash flow management. Industry analysts started noticing. Articles appeared in financial publications questioning whether Manning Capital's aggressive expansion was sustainable. Investor confidence wavered, not dramatically, but enough to matter. Manning Capital's stock price dropped 3%, then 5%. Victor called me directly, his voice tight with controlled fury. "What are you doing?" "I'm working on my new job." "You're feeding information to Marcus Webb to sabotage the company." "I haven't said a word about Manning Capital to anyone at Riverside." "I don't need to. The public numbers speak for themselves." "This is revenge. This is consequences. You're destroying your own family. You destroyed me first. I'm just refusing to carry your lies quietly." He hung up without responding. 2 days later, Victor published a statement through Manning Capital's communications team. It mentioned recent unfounded speculation and baseless questions from competitors and total confidence in our strategic direction. But buried in the statement was a single line that made my blood go cold. "We deeply regret that a former junior analyst's personal struggles have led to professionally inappropriate behavior." Victor was publicly doubling down, reinforcing the lie that I was unstable and vindictive. He was betting I wouldn't fight back, that family loyalty or fear would keep me silent. He was wrong. I drafted my statement carefully. No emotion, no accusations, just facts and a simple timeline. Regarding recent statements from Manning Capital, I was accused of financial misconduct in June 2024. The alleged transactions occurred on specific dates when I was provably out of the country attending conferences and client meetings. I have provided documentation including travel records, hotel receipts, and conference attendance verification to relevant parties. The timeline makes the accusations factually impossible. I request correction of the public record. I sent it to Catherine Brennan at the Financial Times, along with copies of my travel documentation and access logs showing my credentials were used from London while I was in Berlin, Frankfurt, and Edinburgh. The article ran 3 days later, not as a hit piece, but as a careful analysis of timeline inconsistencies and questions about internal accountability at family-run investment firms. The response was immediate. Manning Capital's board demanded internal clarification. Investors who had been quietly concerned now had specific questions. If Victor's accusations didn't match the timeline, what else was inconsistent? The audit findings from Riverside Capital's market analysis were released the same week. They didn't accuse Manning Capital of fraud. They simply noted that the European expansion's projected returns appeared unrealistically optimistic based on current market conditions. The combination was devastating. Timeline questions, performance concerns, investor doubt. Manning Capital's board called an emergency meeting. Victor was being pressured to explain both the accusations against me and the expansion's disappointing performance. The lies were collapsing under the weight of simple facts. Grant called me at 11 at night, his voice raw with panic. "The board is demanding answers. They want to see the evidence against you. Father can't produce the timeline you're claiming is false because it doesn't exist, and the expansion numbers are under full audit." "Good. Lucas, this isn't good. Father's talking about making me responsible for everything, saying I acted alone on both the expansion and the accusations against you." "Did he tell you to frame me?" "Yes, but I'm the one who executed it. The paper trail goes back to me." "Then maybe you should tell the truth." "If I confess, I'm finished. Criminal charges, industry blacklist, everything. You were finished the moment you chose to lie. The only question now is whether you go down alone or take responsibility." Grant was crying again. "What should I do?" "Stop protecting a man who would sacrifice both his sons to save himself. Tell the truth to the investigators. Cooperate fully. It won't erase what you did, but it's the only path that doesn't make you exactly like father. He hung up without responding. 2 days later, Grant gave a statement to Manning Capital's internal investigators. He admitted he had used my credentials to move funds. He explained that Victor had directed the strategy to shift blame for the expansion's cash flow problems. He didn't frame it as his fault. He framed it as joint action between father and son. But the admission was enough. The board suspended both Victor and Grant pending a full investigation. The family meeting was called for a Sunday evening at the estate. Just the four of us, Victor, Beatrice, Grant, and me. I drove out to the house knowing this would be the reckoning. The lies had unraveled completely. Everyone knew the truth now. When I arrived, the same study where I had been accused was now the setting for confession. Victor sat behind his desk, but his commanding presence was gone. He looked older, diminished. Grant sat in the corner, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Beatrice stood near the window, her face pale. I took the chair facing Victor's desk. The same chair where I had sat 3 months earlier while being accused of crimes I didn't commit. The board has requested my resignation, Victor said without preamble. Grant has been suspended indefinitely. The European expansion is being unwound at a significant loss. I know, you've destroyed the company. I corrected a lie. The company destroyed itself. Victor's hands clenched on his desk. I did what I had to do to protect what I built. You sacrificed your son to protect your image. I sacrificed one to save the whole. It's what leaders do. It's what cowards do. Beatrice spoke from the window, her voice trembling. Lucas, please. Can't we find a way to move forward together? I looked at my mother. You helped him falsify those records. You sat in this room while he threatened me. You chose him over your own son. I was afraid, she whispered. Afraid of losing everything. You did lose everything. You just don't see it yet. Grant finally spoke. What do you want from us, Lucas? Revenge? Punishment? Tell us what it takes to fix this. I want you to stop lying, I said simply. To yourselves. To the board. To everyone. Stop pretending this was strategy or leadership or necessary sacrifice. You framed an innocent person to hide your failures. Own that completely. Victor stood abruptly. I built Manning Capital from nothing. 30 years of work. And you're demanding I call myself a fraud? You are a fraud. A brilliant one, but still a fraud. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Manning Capital issued a formal statement 1 week later. Following internal investigation, we have determined that Lucas Ellis was incorrectly implicated in financial irregularities. Mr. Ellis had no involvement in the matters investigated. We apologize for errors in our initial assessment. Additionally, we acknowledge that recent challenges in our European expansion were the result of strategic miscalculations at the executive level. Leadership changes are being implemented to address accountability and governance. The statement was carefully worded to avoid admitting criminal fraud, but it was enough to clear my name publicly. My professional reputation recovered almost overnight. Contacts who had grown distant reached out. Recruiters called with opportunities. Industry peers who had questioned me privately now acknowledge the injustice publicly. Victor stepped down as CEO. The board installed an external executive to lead restructuring. Grant resigned entirely, citing personal reasons. The Manning family empire didn't collapse completely, but fractured. The myth of infallibility was shattered, and I felt no triumph, just clarity. Victor requested to meet me 1 month after his resignation. We met at a cafe in Kensington, far from anywhere we might be recognized. He looked exhausted. The weight of what he had lost showed in every line of his face. I need you to understand something, he said after we sat down. I didn't do this out of malice. I did it because I was terrified. Terrified of what? Of losing control. Of watching everything I built crumble because Grant made mistakes I should have caught. Of being judged a failure after 30 years of success. So, you made me the failure instead. I thought I could control it. Contain it. Make it manageable. His voice cracked. I didn't realize I was destroying my own son to save my image. You realized. You just didn't care. I cared. But I care more about the company. About the legacy. About not being the man who failed. We sat in silence for a moment. What happens now? Victor asked. You accept the consequences. You rebuild if you can, but honestly this time. And you leave me alone. Can you forgive me? I thought about it carefully. I don't know, but I know I'm not carrying your guilt anymore. That's yours to live with. 6 months later, I sat in my office at Riverside Capital looking out at the city skyline. My career had flourished beyond what I imagined. The industry respected how I had handled the crisis with evidence rather than emotion, truth rather than revenge. Grant had moved to Scotland and was working at a small nonprofit focused on financial literacy. We spoke occasionally, carefully, not as brothers trying to pretend the past didn't happen, but as two people learning to be honest. I'm in therapy, he told me during one call. Trying to understand how I became someone who could do that to you. Good. Will we ever be okay? I don't know, but you're doing the right thing now. That matters. Beatrice had divorced Victor quietly. She lived in a small flat in Brighton now, working part-time at a bookshop. We had lunch once a month. The relationship was fragile, but real. I should have protected you, she said during one of our meetings. I was so afraid of losing security that I sacrificed my own son. That's unforgivable. You're right. It is. Then why do you still meet with me? Because you're admitting what you did. That's more than Victor ever will. Victor tried one last time to stop me. He called as I was signing a contract for a major promotion at Riverside Capital. You're really doing this? Building a career with my competitor? I'm building a career on my own merit. Where I do that is my choice. Everything I did for the family. You did it for yourself. The family was just the excuse. Come back to Manning Capital. Help me rebuild it properly this time. We could do it together. That's not my responsibility, but it's your legacy too. No, it's yours. You build it on lies. You maintain it. I'm building something else. What's that? Something honest. Something that doesn't require sacrificing people to survive. He was quiet for a long moment. I'm proud of you. For standing up to me. For refusing to carry my mistakes. Thank you. Will I see you again? Maybe. On my terms, not yours. Our last real conversation happened a year after everything collapsed. Victor asked to meet at the same cafe in Kensington. He looked different, less imposing, more human. The weight of his choices showed in his eyes. I've been seeing a therapist, he said, trying to understand why I built my entire life on control and sacrifice. And she says I was terrified of being vulnerable, of admitting mistakes. So I created a system where I could never be wrong. I just had to find someone else to blame. That's accurate. I destroyed relationships with both my sons. I lost my company. I lost my marriage. All to protect an image that wasn't even real. Legacy without integrity is just a hollow monument, I said quietly. He nodded slowly. I'm trying to rebuild. Not the company. Just myself. Honestly this time. Good luck with that. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? I think I've already let go of the anger. But forgiveness? I don't know. Maybe that's not the point. What is the point? The point is I'm free. Free from your control. Free from your lies. Free from needing your approval to know my worth. Today I sit in my office at Riverside Capital, 3 years after that night in Victor's locked study. I'm director of strategic analysis now. My reputation is stronger than it ever was at Manning Capital because it's built on real achievement, not family name. Manning Capital still exists, smaller and humbler. Victor sold his majority stake and works as a consultant now. The company is run by professionals who value transparency. Grant finished his nonprofit work and started a small advisory firm focused on ethical business practices. We have dinner occasionally. The relationship will never be what it was, but it's real. Beatrice volunteers at a women's shelter, helping people escape controlling relationships. We're close now in ways we never were before. The family structure that defined us for decades is gone, but something more honest has replaced it. I received a letter from Victor last month. Just a brief note. Lucas, I've been thinking about what you said, about legacy and integrity. I spent 30 years building a company, but I spent 30 years destroying trust. One of those things will outlast me. The other won't. Thank you for refusing to carry my lies. You saved me from myself, even if it took losing everything to see it. I read the letter several times. Then I filed it away, not under forgiveness or reconciliation, just under healing. The slow process of letting wounds close without pretending they never existed. They lied about me to protect themselves. They framed their own son to hide their failures. They calculated that my reputation was worth less than their image. They were wrong. Not because I destroyed them in revenge, though I could have, but because I refused to carry their lie. I didn't shout the truth from rooftops. I didn't wage a public war. I just presented evidence calmly and let the facts speak. Timeline inconsistencies, access logs, travel records, documentation that couldn't be argued away. The truth didn't need drama. It just needed to be stated clearly. I learned something important through all of this. Freedom isn't about cutting people off completely or burning every bridge. It's about refusing to let other people's fear control your life. Victor was terrified of failure, so he built a system where he could never be wrong. He just blamed others when things went wrong. Grant was terrified of disappointing Victor, so he sacrificed his own integrity to protect a man who would have sacrificed him just as easily. Beatrice was terrified of losing security, so she enabled cruelty rather than risk standing alone. Their fear drove every choice, and they wanted me to absorb that fear too. To stay silent because speaking up was scary. To accept blame because fighting back was risky. But I learned that carrying other people's fear is heavier than facing consequences. That protecting your truth matters more than protecting their comfort. They try to guilt me into obedience. I chose freedom instead.
If you're listening to this story, maybe you're in a situation where someone is trying to make you carry blame that isn't yours. Maybe family is demanding you sacrifice yourself to protect their image. Maybe you're being told that speaking truth is betrayal. Let me tell you what I learned. You don't owe anyone your silence when they've lied about you. You don't owe anyone protection when they've sacrificed you. You don't owe anyone loyalty when they've shown you none. Family isn't just blood. It's choosing to protect each other's truth, not just each other's image. Real love doesn't demand you accept blame for things you didn't do. Real love doesn't lock you in a room and force you to confess to crimes you didn't commit. Real love doesn't calculate whether your reputation is expendable. The industry remembers my story, not as a scandal, but as a case study in how truth eventually surfaces no matter how carefully lies are constructed. I speak at conferences occasionally about corporate accountability and ethical leadership. I don't tell war stories or seek sympathy. I just explain what happened and why documentation matters more than accusations. Young professionals reach out asking for advice on similar situations. People who've been scapegoated by superiors. People being blamed for failures they didn't cause. I tell them the same thing every time. Document everything. Stay calm. Present facts, not emotions. And never confess to something you didn't do, no matter how much pressure you face. The truth takes time, but it's more patient than lies. 3 years later, I understand something I couldn't see at the beginning. They didn't lie about me because I was weak. They lied because I was convenient. Because I had already left their direct control by working independently. Because sacrificing me cost them less than admitting their own failures. But being convenient doesn't make you guilty. Being vulnerable doesn't make you responsible. I survived because I refused to accept blame that wasn't mine. Because I documented truth systematically. Because I presented evidence rather than begging for belief. The family I was born into tried to sacrifice me to protect themselves. But I built a different family. Colleagues who respect honesty. Friends who value integrity. A life built on truth instead of fear. Victor lost his empire. Grant lost his career. Beatrice lost her marriage. The family structure collapsed. But I didn't destroy them. I simply refused to carry their lie. And in refusing, I discovered something more valuable than any family legacy. The freedom to build a life on my own terms, where my worth isn't determined by other people's need for scapegoats. They lied about me to protect themselves. I told the truth to protect everyone else. In the end, that's the only legacy that matters. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been blamed for something you didn't do to protect someone else's reputation, comment below. Share your experience if you feel safe doing so. You're not alone in this. Subscribe for more stories about choosing truth over comfort, integrity over image. Remember, you don't need to carry blame that isn't yours. You just need courage to present the facts calmly. Until next time, protect your truth. You're worth it.